Okay, now to retrieve the student table, so to do that, first of all, let's define a function for that. So start it from the interface. So here I'm going to define a function, public. The name I'm going to give is list students. And I'm not going to pass any parameters here. So now let's look at the return type of it. So it's going to return a table, the whole student table. In the table, each row, if you look at each rows, first row, second row, each rows represent a student. This first one represent one student, this second row represent another student. So here we are going to retrieve those details and set those values to a student object. For each records we are going to set those values to student objects. So here I am going to put the return type as array list. So array list, you know that it can dynamically add elements to it, so no need to worry about the size. That's the reason I am using array list here. And the object type here it is student. So this array list is going to consist of student objects. So I am importing the library and the class. Okay. So the function is looks like this: public return type array list of student objects, and the name is list students. Now go to this student implementation class and add unimplemented methods. Okay, here it is. So the body of this method is going to be same as this, those try catch things. So I'm just copying down here and removing this. Here also we are going to use the prepare statement, but that will be a select statement. Then thereafter these things are going to be same, no change at all in these things. Okay, so here first of all let's declare an array list object, array list of setting this type as student. That's the reason I have used the model class for student. I am naming it as students and equal new array list. Okay, here I have created an object of array list student. Now here we have get the connection, and now going to write the prepare statement. So the statement here is we are going to retrieve the information from the database. So to do that we have to use select statement. So select start from student. Then here we are not using any parameters like the earlier we did use for this insert statement. If you want, in some cases, if you are using the where clause here, select start from student where something you specify like id equal to like that, then you have to you can use the question mark placeholder, and then thereafter you can set the parameter like earlier we did. But here I am going without, I am not specifying anything here. I am going to retrieve whole table here. So prepare statement is ready. So now to execute it, So here if you look at earlier we used pt dot, that means prepare statement dot execute. So prepare statement dot execute, that will return a boolean, true or false, but here we are going to retrieve a table. So for that we have to use execute query. So here look at the documentation. So it returns a result set object that contains the data produced by the query. So here we are going to return the data from the database. So return type here is result set, and to assign that result set I am creating a result set object here, naming it as rs, and it asks to import library. Okay, so execute pt.execute query. This will return the result set, and it is assigned to this rs. Okay, that's done. Next we have to, now our table is in this rs object, we have retrieved the table. Now it's up to retrieving the table values row by row, and assigning it to the student object. As I said earlier, I'm going to retrieve it and assign for student objects and put it in this array list. So here I'm going to use while loop. Inside this while loop I'm using a function called rs for this result set, rs dot next. So rs dot next will return boolean true or false. So what it will do is it points a cursor, think like it points a pointer to the rows of the table. So at first if I put rs dot next, it will point to this first row of this table, this first one. Okay, so now it's pointing to the first row, so we have access to get the data from the first row of the student table. Here what I am going to do is get the data one by one, cell by cell. First cell id, then name, then campus, and assign them to the student object. So I want to create a student object here, student st, and naming it as st. So I have created a student object here. Okay, now earlier in the model class implementation I have generated setters and getters for the student. So here is where it's going to be used. First I am going to set the id for student. Okay, now let's think how to get this id from the table. So this id is the first column of this table, so we know that. So to get that, to retrieve any data from this table, two things we have to consider. One is the data type, whether it's a string or integer, and another one is the position, like in which position the column is in, first column or second column or third column. So here the id is the first column and the data type is integer. So here I am going to get it using rs dot get. So the data type is integer, and we can get it two ways. Rs dot get int, inside the parameter you can give the column index. The column index means which column, as I said, first column or second column, third column. Or else the next option is get int, and into the bracket the parameter we can pass the column name. So id, if I pass name as id, the column label, then it will retrieve the first column's value. So here I am going to use column index, so numbering is much easy. So the first column, then the next one is name, st dot set name. So rs is a string, so get string, the column index is second, it's the second column, and thereafter last one is campus, and then it also string, column index is 3. So after I have set the attributes for the student object, now I am gonna add this to the students array list. So this array list can add data dynamically, so each and every time this loop goes around, it will add the student object to it, and once the first row is complete, it will goes again, and if there is another row, it will point to it and it returns true. So while becomes true, and it runs here, create another student object and assign the values and add to the students array list. So once all these are done, so now we can return the students list, I mean the students array list. So that is how the retrieval works, to get the table from the database. Now let's look at how to get it onto the JSP. Okay, now in this list students JSP, so here we are going to retrieve it. So here I am going to use scriptlet. Scriptlet means attaching the Java program to the web page, to the JSP page. So scriptlet can be written inside this tag. So, okay, this is a tag where we are going to write our Java. So that is what we call scriptlet in this JSP pages. So here I am going to call the function to get the array list of students. So before that, we need to import few packages to be imported here, because we are going to use the student object, an array list, and the service class. So all the packages it belongs to are to be imported here. So this is how it is done. Page import equal to, first I am importing the model class from the model package, model dot student. Next I am going to import the service class package from the service package, service dot student impl run implementation. Then thereafter here we are going to use array list. So we need to pass import the array list libraries for that, java dot util dot array list. Okay, now so these are the 3 packages we need to import here before getting into the Java coding. Now get on with this Java coding inside this scriptlet tag. Okay, first I am going to get an object of student impl class. Okay, thereafter we need array list here too, array list of type student, naming it as students here too, new array list. Okay, so that's it. Then then thereafter here we need to here we are going to assign the students array list that we retry using the CRUD function by performing the CRUD function. So for that we implemented a function called list student, so it will return an array list, and here we are going to pass that array list to this students object. So students equal to impl dot list students, so it will return the array list here. So now we have the students array list in this JSP page by performing this Java implementation coding. Next let's get on to the printing those. Printing means displaying those two into the interface. So here I am again going to use the scriptlet. So we can retrieve the array list value using for each loop. So for each loop, you can do it by for loop too, but this is much better than other normal for loop when it comes to looping through array list. So this is how it looks like. Here is an object I define here, the student object, then the array list students. So here what happens is in this for each loop, each and every time this loop works, the elements in this students array list, which are also the student type, those elements will be passed to the student object one by one, and using this student object I am going to retrieve its attributes value by using getters. So here I am going to do that. So I am going to get those values and print it down inside this table cells. So for that also I am going to use scriptlet, and here I have to use the equal symbol here to print down value using Java scriptlet. So st dot first one is id, so get id. I am copying it, and the next one is st dot get name, and the last one is st dot get campus. So we are done with passing the values into the table cells. So this all tr tag, this represent one row. So every time this loop works, for each and every student elements in the array list, a new row will be added. So in that way the table can be displayed. So here I am closing the loop at the end of the row. So I am closing it down here. Okay, now we can run and check it out whether it works or not. So I'm gonna run it now. So here it is. There are two records in my table in the database, and those two are displayed here. So there is more records and more rows will be printed in the interface. So this is how it works. We defined a function in the interface and implemented inside this student IMPL class. Thereafter, in this JSP page, we used scriptlet to perform the Java coding. So using that we call the function, and then we pass the student array list here. Thereafter, using the for each loop, we loop through the array list and printed the rows. So that is how this list student works. So In this way you can retrieve the table from your database. There is another way that if you don't want this array list, then you can do this by having the return type as result set. So you can straight away get this result set here and make this return type as result set and return the result set here. Thereafter in this JSP page, what you can do is again just like we did the while loop here, we used while loop rs.next to loop through the table. So you can use the same while loop here to loop through the each and every row in the table in the database, and you can print it down here. So either way you can use result set or this array list. That also an easy method. Okay, you can do this with this method too, so it's up to you. So we are done with this list student JSPs. Now let's move on to this. There are two buttons, edit and delete. So these two buttons consist of, actually these two buttons belongs to two separate forms to perform two separate functions. Let's see how to do that.